Welcome to our July webinar. My name is Natalie from Orchid, and today I will go through new Extender apps to validate data in Sage 300 and the new features in the Extender product update that will be released very shortly. In last month's webinar, we discussed key priorities for today's CFO in an increasingly digital world and how a digital finance function can improve operational efficiency, enhance accuracy, ensure regulatory compliance, and support faster data-driven decision-making. Today, we will focus on data validation, automation, and approval to improve efficiency and ensure compliance. We have just released a new version of the Grid Optional Fields app. You can now validate the optional fields combination entered on the grid. For example, on a sales order, if you select Region Australia, you can only select Australian projects. Or for an AP invoice, if you select Entity 1, you can only select projects for Entity 1. We're also going to release soon an Extender app to validate that all entries in an AP invoice batch have a document attached in Document Management link. But the major new feature in the next Extender product update is the new Workflow Rules engine. And this is what we will focus on in the main part of the webinar. First, a brief overview of Extender for those of you who are new to Orchid. Extender is a cost-effective way to tailor and extend Sage 300. It caters for business requirements that can't be met by out-of-the-box Sage 300. It can be used with Sage core modules such as AP, AR, GL, IC, OE, PO, or third-party modules developed in the SDK. Orchid's EFT, Pacific Text, Purchasing Workflow, or to simply manufacturing. All customizations and configuration are held in the database and will upgrade with Sage 300 by just upgrading Extender as a Sage module. In the configurator part, you can set up alerts and notifications, alerts by email or by creating Orchid Extender notes triggered when Sage 300 data changes. You can log field changes, what changed, when it changed, and who changed it. And you can configure workflow for approval and process automation. You can also use Extender to customize Sage 300 with Python scripts for validation, defaulting some values, automating some processes. You can customize classic desktop screens or create new ones to add a button, hide fields, add tabs. You can create your own custom table and associated logic and screens to store additional data in Sage 300. It can be configuration parameters for application, staging data that might be sitting in an Access database such as simple customer complaint. And one of the things you can do with Extender is run some apps that are designed in with Extender Python scripts. So what we're doing today is looking at two new apps that we have developed to include validation, automation, and improvements to the Sage screen. So they actually use a lot of these features of Extender. The advantage with the app being that you don't need to write the new scripts. You can purchase the app from us. You just need to install it and configure it. Let's have a look at the Grid Optional Fields app. We introduced this Extender app a few years ago, and that is the ability to configure optional fields that you want to add to a Sage 300 grid to facilitate the data entry. For example, when entering an AP invoice or a GL journal. In the latest version, you now have the ability to configure dependencies between the optional fields. For example, region and project. So if you have added optional fields for an AP invoice detail line, If the region, also called the parent field, is Australia, then the allowed values for the project can be mining 1, mining 2, mining 3. But if the region, the parent optional field, is Canada, the projects allowed will be different: ski lift refit, hockey rink refit. You can also use this for location and department, and you can have more than 2. This ensures consistency of data, reduces user errors, and is particularly relevant when using dimensions in Sage 300 to track data that are not in the GL. So this supports your dimension analysis in Sage 300 very well. Also works well with ORCID's inter-entity transactions when you use optional field for the entity that the record must go to. Let's take a look in Sage 300. Now, first example, we're going to look at an OE order. I've started entering it for customer Bargain Mart, my fluorescent desk lamp. So let's select our sales region, Australia. Then I can select the project. I have 3 projects available, or NA if it's not a project-related cell. And type this, select this one. But if I was to type something that is not in the list, it then validates that this project is okay for the Australia sales region. Now I have another pair that I've configured here, my course location. It's going to be at the Gaylord in Chicago, and then here's my cost center, JC1 or JC2. Now here, if I select Canada for this sales region, you will see that I have different options. Let's select Ice Rink Refit, and similarly, if I type something wrong, then you see it's not a valid option. Behind the scenes, we do have standard Sage 300 optional fields that you would normally configure by clicking this button on Optional Fields. And here you're seeing our region, Canada, our project, Ice Rink Refit. In our second example, we're going to look at an AP invoice. Again, I've started entering the AP invoice batch, but I haven't selected my project location yet. So if I'm selecting JO, Orlando, then the available cost centers are JO1 or JO2. And then I can select the course that relates to this cost center. If I change my project, this gets cleared so that I can select the available courses for this particular cost center. So it does work with more than 2 optional fields pair. Now, how does this work? In Extender, in the setup area, we have a module called Customize Grid Optional Fields. And at the moment, it applies to all these transaction screen. Your AP invoice, AR invoice, GL journal, IC receipt, IC adjustment, OE orders, some PO transactions, and even Pacific Text purchase requisition and purchase entry. So this is where we enable the scripts. So that's adding the optional fields to the grid. We'll see which ones we've configured in this database. It is per Sage 300 screen. So this is our AP 2100, our AP invoice entry screen. We've added cost center, and the parent is the location. We've also added the course, where the parent is the cost center. Then we've added the location, which does not have a parent. And this is now added to the GL journal entry screen, Jul-2125, our location and our cost center. And if we look at the order entry screen that we've looked at before, we have our region, which is the parent, and our project, which is a child of region. Then we have location, and location being the parent of cost center. So this is pretty straightforward. Once you have defined your optional fields in Common Services and added them to the relevant detail line in Sage 300 in the optional field setup, you come here and you add those records. And then the second step is to define your parent-child optional field values. So let's look at one of our examples. For Australia, we have mining 1. And if we look here, we have mining 1, 2, 3, and NA. If I want to add mining 4, I'll just choose Australia as my parent, mining 4 for my new project, and then I add it. And it's now going to be available in the list of options that I can choose. So once you've configured this, restart the Sage desktop, and the fields are available for ease of data entry. So it's very easy to set up. As you can see, you import the module, configure which screens and which optional fields on which screens, enter the valid values. You can also import them as you can into any Extender custom table, and you're ready to go. So this app is available for purchase from Orchid and requires Extender runtime. Many of you know about Orchid Document Management Link to link documents to Sage 300 records, for example, attaching supporting documents to AP invoices. And this supports the paperless office. With this Extender app, you can now prevent AP invoice batches from being posted if an entry doesn't have a document attached in the configured folder. And we also show a warning as you're entering the transactions. This prevents incomplete records, improves audit compliance, and applies to all Sage 300 users who are thinking of using Document Management Link to move towards a paperless office. Let's see how it works in Sage 300. In Sage 300, I've got my AP invoice batch listing. The details have been entered. I want to post it or make it ready to post. Getting an error message that there are no files found with the pattern that I'm looking for, vendor-document number for entry 3. So let's open this batch. See, it's not made ready to post, so I can't post it. Let's look at these detail invoices. The first one here has a document attached in Document Management Link, which is renamed based on my vendor number and my document number. So it's all good. And if I made a change and save, everything, no error, no warning, no error. If I look at my second one, let me try and do a change. I can see a warning message that entry 3 does not have a file for that invoice. Let me now add a document. As per our Document Management Link configuration, the document I'm attaching has been renamed based on the vendor and the document number that I have entered here. And now, let me save this invoice, no more warning. And now if I try to make this batch ready to post, it's made ready to post and no more warning. Behind the scene, how does this work? We have an Extender module that's here. So when you import it, it does, the scripts are created, and the only thing you need to configure is in the custom table, what is the path to your documents and how have you configured Document Management Link. So here, this is about making the batch ready to post. We're saying it can be a warning or an error. We've said this is an error, you can't post the batch. We're validating all documents, but if you didn't want to do interest, you could change that, remove interest. And if you don't want to validate PO invoices for documents, then you just remove it from the source application. And this DML document directory needs to match the configuration that you have in Document Management Link. So here, one folder per vendor, ID vend, and the files are called vendor number - invoice number. Similarly, when I'm actually entering an invoice, so inserting or adding a new or updating an invoice, Generally, it would match what you see on the when you're posting, but you could have it different. And here we have the same path, and it's a warning, but you could make it an error and people can't enter the invoice can't save the invoice if they haven't attached a document. This is the new AP Invoice and DML Validation app. We included workflow features in Extender a few years ago, but realized that the development of workflow templates could get a bit complicated. With the latest features, Extender will now include standard workflow templates to approve a range of Sage 300 records, supported by easy-to-use workflow configuration tools. And users will be able to configure only the business rules side of the process. So how do I know which records need to be approved and who approves and how many approvers? This will streamline the process, saves time to configure the approval. It's all customizable to your own business rules. And it supports Teamwork, our new product developed jointly with AutoSimply. Teamwork integrates Extender workflow, ORCID notes, and AC chat, so you can chat about records and approve them in a mobile chat environment. How does the workflow configuration and approval processes work? You start with your business needs. Why do I need to approve some records? What records do I need to approve under what conditions? Then, in Extender, you'll set up your workflow rules, and that mainly involves defining your conditions. For example, purchase orders or sales orders above a certain amount entered in a particular region are approved by this user, but if they're below another amount, then they're approved by different people. Once this is all configured, it runs. So when a user creates a transaction, for example, an urgent PO over $10,000, the user gets notified by email or in the chat app when you're using Teamwork. Users can then view all the details and approve in the Workflow app or on the Sage 300 desktop. The approval and status are all updated in Sage 300. You have a full audit trail of the approval process. You can approve a range of records, and this is an example of the Workflow console in Sage 300. We will show you one example today of approving in the chat app, but the full presentation of Teamwork and the chat app will be in a couple of weeks. Workflow rules build on Extender workflow templates, so they apply to batches, GL journal batches, AP invoice batches, AR invoices, transaction headers such as OE sales orders, purchase requisitions, OE shipments, IC transactions, so internal usage, shipments, receipts, adjustments, transfers, and master file records such as a new customer, a new vendor, a new item, change of fields like change of AR customer credit limit or AP vendor payment. For each workflow template applied to a Sage 300 record, you can configure what you need to approve. For example, all new retail customers, OE shipments to certain countries, purchase orders above a certain amount. Then you set up how do you determine if approval is required and who approves. Be based on total amount, customer vendor group, optional fields, the first entry online in a batch. So we're making it easy. We can preset some fields that you would typically use to determine if an approval is required. Or you can use any field on the Sage 300 view and table that it applies to. Then you configure who approves. You can have up to 5 approvers. They can be sequential, so approver 1, and then if approver 1 approves, approver 2, etc. Up to 5 approvers. You can also configure that users can be an approver of a particular type of record, so they can approve a GL transaction batch. But if they are the ones who submitted it for approval, they can't approve their own records. So I might be an approver of batches entered by Anne, but if I try to post a batch, somebody else than me has got to approve in that group. You can also use workflow user groups for parallel approvers. So that would be a scenario where, in the case of multi-levels, user A and user B can both approve, but they can approve in any order. So the first one approves, and then the second one, when they log in, do the final approval. And all the details are logged in the workflow history and the inquiry screens. So who the workflow was assigned to, who actually approved, particularly in the case of a group, and the comments that they enter. And when you use Teamwork and the chat app, all of the chats relating to that approval are also stored in Sage 300. The best way is to show you some examples in action, including how to configure the rules. Let's start with a new customer approval. Approving new customers in accounts receivable is very useful for risk management, where you can check that all your internal procedures are followed. Credit control, for example, you can ensure that credit checked documents have been saved in Document Management link. You can also confirm that the details are correct before activating the customers, which should improve data accuracy. In our scenario, we have different approvers for different types of customers. If the customer is in the retail group and they are in the blue zone based on an optional field, Anne and Terence can approve. If they are retail customer not in the blue zone, then Anne and Steve can approve. These are sequential approvers. Anne approves first and then the second approver. In our example, Anne will approve on the workflow console in Sage 300, and Terence will approve using the AC Chat app using Teamwork. Let's look at this in Sage 300, and you'll notice that in the Extender setup screens, we now have two new screens, Workflow Rules and Workflow View Defaults. Today's focus is on workflow rules. This is where you configure your business rules to enable the workflow. We're going to look at our new AR customer approval rules. This is linked to workflow template. Those of you who have used Extender Workflow before will recognize this with our steps to start the workflow, to wait, where we can approve and reject, etc. But here, with one approve step, we can manage the 5 levels, up to 5 levels, depending on the rules. So you shouldn't really have to look at the workflow templates anymore for an existing record. It all happens on this screen. It's attached to the AR customer view, and our customers are grouped into 3. Retail customers in the blue zone are approved by Anne and Terence. How do I know that these customers need to be approved by Anne and Terence? Well, their UPS zone optional field equals blue and their group code equals retail. And then I set up my approvers here. If I want to change subsequently and it's not Terence anymore, somebody else, I can come in here and select a different user. Now, our second group of customers are customers who are not in the blue zone, but their customer group is retail. They are approved by Anne and Steve. All the other customers, so they would be our wholesale customers, have to be approved by 2 users in the finance group. And they have to be 2 separate users. So this is an example of parallel approval, which we will look at in more detail in another scenario. In this example, we're going to create 2 customers in the retail group, one in the blue zone and one in the red zone, and see what happens. I'm going to create a new customer, org 003. Update the details as required and select the default optional field for my zone, which is red. When I add this customer, I'm expecting two things to happen. It's been made inactive because it needs to be approved by Anne and Steve. So if we look back at our inactive flag here, it has been selected automatically. And if we refresh our tray, we can see that the approval has started. We are using Teamwork to send messages to the chat, and we are showing these messages in the notes panel here. So all users in the back office can know what is going on. You also notice that we have configured document management link where we can add documents for credit limit. So I could add another example of my credit check report. Now, if I add another customer, retail 4, and choose a different value for my optional field here, I can choose blue. When I add this customer, I'm expecting two things to happen. The customer remains inactive until approved, and the approvers, being in the blue zone, are Anne and Terence. So let's go back here. We can see the customer is inactive. And if I look at my notes coming from Teamwork, you can see that customers need to be approved by Anne and Terence, and it's waiting for the first approver, Anne. Next step of the process, I'm going to log into Sage 300 as Anne and look at my workflow console. I have two customers I need to approve, ORC003 and ORC004. What I can do from here is check the values. So I can see who the approvers are, Anne and Steve, and some other notes. I can see the retail, it's a retail customer group. I can also drill down straight to the AR customer screen, see what's been entered, check all the data. I can view the documents that have been added. I can double click on them to open if need be. If I see something that isn't right, I could either update it or reject and ask somebody to change the data, depending on what it is and depending on the processes. Once I'm done and I'm happy with it, I can approve. It's now dropped off my console. I'm left with ORC004 in the blue zone, and we've chosen to set a background color of blue. I can do the same thing. I can drill down to the customer if I need to. Check who the other approvers are, Anne and Terence, or approve or reject. So I'm just going to approve it for now. Dropped off my console. I'm done. Because I have some admin rights, I can view the status of all those records. So I can see that this one is assigned to Steve, this one is assigned to Terence. So if need be, I could follow up. Now going to log in to the app as Terence. It's my second approver. In this example, I'm using the Windows app because it's easier to share. I can see I have one pending approval, one chat is happening. And for my customer in the blue zone, I can see Anne has already approved. It's waiting for me. I have a few things I can do. I can click on my query to see some details. The credit limit that's been set, the group, the code term, the address, the country. I can chat and add some more message. Have my communication with my team members. When I'm happy with it, I can then approve. When it's approved, you can see the workflow is now completed. I have all the approvers listed with all their comments. And if I go back in Sage 300, customer Orchid Retail 4 is not active. You can see the history here. You can see Terence's comment in the chat history. I also have access to my workflow detail log, and I can see what's happened to our customers Retail 3 and Retail 4. I could choose to focus on Retail 4, created by admin, first approved by Anne and then by Terence. And if I click on values, I will have more detail about the history. So who the actual approvers were, what the comments were, the reason, the group, PS zone value, and some audit information regarding the chat that was created and who was added to the chat. This gives you an example of sequential approvers. We only used 2 levels, but if you had 5 levels, it would be the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, approve. And then the final one, when the final one approves, if everyone else has approved, when the final one approves, the customer is activated. In this example, we're looking at purchase order approval. Typical use of approval workflow for purchase order is often based on the amount and the user who created the record. We can do this, but in this example, we're going to look at the total amount and the vendor's country. So if it's less than $5,000, only 1 approver. If it's above $5,000, and in some countries, 2 approvers. Above $5,000 and the vendor is in other countries, 3 approvers. Let's look at this in Sage 300. Let's find our purchase order approval rule. Again, this is linked to a purchase order workflow template, which has a few steps, including approve and reject, and it knows how to deal with the multiple levels that are configured in the workflow rules. And in this example, in the final steps, so when the PO is approved, we actually print the PDF and save it in a configured folder for use in document management link, for example. So this is how this one is configured. If the PO is below $5,000, so this is based on a field called doc total, but we can configure a friendly name, and we do this through our view defaults. So Extender comes with some pre-configured view defaults so that you're not facing the list of all the fields that relate to a purchase order header. We've identified the most commonly used fields, so you can click on the Finder and choose any of these fields that we've pre-configured for in this particular database. But if you want some other field that you know that make particular sense for you, you can also find them using F6. So here we have different comparison operation. In this case, we're choosing less than 5,000. We're saying that the approver is Anne. If the PO is greater than 5,000 and the country is one of the value configured in that optional table, so in common services around the optional fields, then the approvers are Anne and Terence. All other POs are approved by 3 users, Anne, Terence, and Steve. So here with this list of countries, we are using the optional table in common services because it's easier to maintain if you have a long list, but you have the ability to do in a particular list or also use the AC Chat security group if you are using Teamwork. So let's go and create 2 purchase orders. I'm going to create one. Less than $5,000. PO is on hold and I'm waiting for Anne to approve the purchase order. Again, PO was put on hold automatically based on the workflow having started. Let me create another one for Coastal Heating of Ottawa. Let's check the country, Canada. Placing an order for 250, it is over 7,000, and it is in one of the countries that are configured for 2 approvers. So again, when I'm posting this, it's still Anne, but if we check here, it's waiting for Anne, but as approval 1 or 2. PO above 5,000 in those countries have to be approved by Anne and Terence. Let's look at our workflow console logged in as Anne. Anne has 2 POs to approve. One is for a small amount, one is for a bigger amount. As previously, you can drill down to go and look at the PO or go and check the vendor activity, any of the Sage 300 screen for this customer, for this vendor. Check the PO and view what's happened if a chat is going on. She'll see the details here. And she can then approve. Dropped off her console. She's now left with the other one. I'm also going to approve this one. It's dropped off my console, but as a user with more admin rights, I can go and check. It has now been assigned to Terence. Terence can view this PO that was approved by Anne, so he can be part of the conversation but doesn't need to approve. On this one, where he's the second level approver, he can also see the conversation that's happened so far. Also has access to some PO details from the query, what the details of that vendor. Can come here and print the PO. To see exactly what was ordered and what was the quantity, etc. So that's one way to check. So even though Terence is using his mobile phone and the app has access to a lot of information to determine that he can approve. So Terence is the final approver. So see that the approval has now been completed by both Anne and Terence. And if I go back into Sage 300 and look at my PO, PO 52 for chloride systems is not for the webinar order, is not on hold anymore. I have the history here as to the fact that Anne had approved it. The PO has been printed and saved in a folder that I can view in Document Management link. I could also choose to email the vendor when it is approved, but in this case, we're just printing it and we can email it separately. And if I look at 53, it also has been approved, not on hold anymore. I have the history here as well. And my PO has been printed and is available to be seen in Document Management link. I also have a full audit log in my workflow detail inquiry for PO 52 or PO 53. You can see it was started by Anne, by admin, Anne approved. 52 that completed the process. It's approved. For 53, Anne approved. It was approved level 1, and Terence then approved, and it was the final approval. So we've seen examples that we have pre-configured of using the workflow rules, but obviously you could go and change the amount, the list of countries. You can change the rule to not use the country at all, have more approvers, all this within this simple workflow rules screen. In this scenario, we are looking at AP invoice batch approval. And the way we're going to configure this is we have different users who approve invoices that come from PO, purchase order, versus invoices that have been entered directly in AP where the source application is AP. We're also going to have to show you how to do parallel approval, where two users in the finance group can approve in any order, but the user who entered or who submits the batch for approval cannot approve to enforce segregation of duty. Let's look at this in Sage 300 in our workflow rules. AP invoice batch approval. We're saying that all non-AP invoice batches need to be approved by Susan and Steve. The way we've configured this is saying that the source application is not equal to AP. And here you can see we've put two fields, but you can use any field on the batch view, or you could use details about the first invoice in that batch. Now for AP invoice batches, where the source application is AP, any two users from finance can approve, except if they've entered it. And on our options, we've configured to auto-post the batch when it's approved. You don't have to do that, but that's what we're going to demonstrate. If we look at our finance group, this is configured here in the user groups. And in the finance group, I've got Anne, Steve, and Terence. So what we're going to do now, Anne is going to log into Sage 300. We can see that, let's make this a little bit bigger. We can see that this PO generated batch, where the source application is PO, has been submitted for approval, and it's waiting for approval by Susan as per our workflow rules. Now we have an AP invoice batch here. I've entered my AP invoice. I'm ready to post it. So an Anne submits this batch for approval by making it ready to post. And I get a message that approval is required by any two users in the finance group. You can see that this batch, where the source application is AP, has been assigned to finance. I can see the source application is AP, so again, all the values that are used for workflow rules are saved for auditing purposes. So I can actually still view it from here. See, it's assigned to finance. I'm part of that group. So I can try and approve. But it's telling me I can't approve my own workflow. Segregation of duty. And parallel approval. I'm now logged into Sage 300 as Steve. And I can see all the approvals that are pending assigned to me or a group I'm in. In this case, we're looking at our AP invoice batch, which was started by Anne, submitted for approval by Anne. I can drill down and open the batch if I want to see the details. And see the documents that have been added. If I'm using Teamwork, I will be able to see the discussions and the approval status in the notes here. I can approve the batch. If I check the values, you can see that Steve has now been the first approver. But the batch is still assigned to finance because that's my approval level 2. Steve's comment is there. But if Steve tries to approve again, it says can't approve your own workflow. So now I need another user in the finance group, in this case Terence, and we're going to show you how Terence can approve in the app. Double check here, I'm logged in as Terence. And there's two ways you can approve. One is looking at the extender workflow approval. So this is my mobile console, the equivalent of Workflow Anywhere. And if I'm looking at the AP invoice batch, you can see it's been approved by level 1 of 2. It's now waiting for level 2 to approve. But we're going to do it in the chat, where I see more detail about the history. And eventually, when you're okay with the discussion, approve. It's been approved by Steve and Terence, and we can see both of their comments. If I check back my workflow console, you can see it's dropped off the console. It's been approved. If I look at my invoice batch list, it was my July 7 invoices, batch 69. It has been approved by Steve and Terence. It was made ready to post, and auto post was yes, so the batch was posted successfully. Steve doesn't have access to the workflow inquiries. Let's have a look at the inquiry audit log. Logged in as admin. And let's look at our AP invoice batch 69. Ready to post approval was requested by Anne. Anne tried to approve, but wasn't allowed. Then Steve approved as level 1. Steve tried to approve again as level 2. That didn't work. And then Terence did the final approval. You can see this here on the values as well. Steve and Terence were the approvers, and I can see their comments. So in this example around the AP invoice batch, we've seen how we can implement parallel approval and segregation of duties, and this applies to the other workflows, particularly workflow on batch such as GL journals, AP payments, AR invoices, AR receipts. We have looked at 3 examples of approving new customers, purchase orders, and AP invoice batches with various conditions. Hope you can see how easy it is to adjust the approval rules to your business requirements. Why would you implement approval workflow? For regulatory compliance, so that approver can check that all your internal policies have been followed. For risk management, the approval process will help with segregation of duties, as we've demonstrated, ensuring that no single individual has complete control over a transaction or a process, thereby reducing risks of fraud. For credit control, you can check that the customer credit check records are reliable before activating the customer. Data accuracy, as approvers can double-check all the details, including optional fields in Sage 300, before approving. Operational efficiency. Workflow rules provide a structured framework to determine who approves what, and the rules are documented in Sage 300. You've also seen that it works very well in conjunction with Document Management Link. Transparency and audit trail in Sage 300. All the steps are visible to users who need to get an update in the Sage workflow history and in the Teamwork AC Chat app if you are using Teamwork for approval. Ease of use. The workflow, the approval process starts automatically when creating a customer or posting a batch. And you can approve in the console in Sage 300 or in an app on the road, so there should be no delays in approving. And rules can be amended by admin users much more easily than in the previous workflow setup. This applies to many industries, but may be particularly relevant in financial services, software and technology companies, professional services, manufacturing, distribution. There are a lot more options to configure the rules, and we will discuss them in more details in a future training session on using Extender Workflow and workflow rules. And all these benefits of Extender Workflow are enhanced further when using Teamwork and the AC Chat app. More transparency, as all your discussions are saved in Sage 300, can be shared with front office team members who may not use Sage 300 and back office people who are in Sage 300. All this helping with ease of use and rapid approvals. So for more details on approving in AC Chat using Teamwork, join us in our next webinar. Now we're open for a Q&A on either the apps or workflow rules that we have presented today, or any other questions you may have for ORCID.